Hey everyone, it's the Kung Fu Genius, aka Alex Richter. And if you're listening to us on audio only, I'd appreciate you rating and reviewing the podcast wherever you listen to it. And of course, if you like what I do here, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius on YouTube and hit that bell for notifications. Are you a fan of Wing Chun Kung Fu? Well, if you listen to me, I assume you are. I got great news for Kung Fu Genius fans. Right now, you can get an all-access 1-month free trial subscription to Wing Chun Illustrated magazine. Yes, I said free. Go to WCInewsstand.com and register in the upper right-hand corner, fill in your email and password, and use the code KFGTrial to get your free trial to the issues from 2011 to the current issue. That's right, all the issues, even the one with this guy on the cover. My Kung Fu Genius column is in all the new issues, as if you need another reason to get this awesome magazine. Go get your free trial subscription today. For all that information, check out the description below. And with that, let's get started.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems, lots of kicking tires, and lots of, hey Jack, I hear that Bruce Lee cat died from some electrical muscle stimulation machine from Japan. And I saw this on the internet. Let's get to it.
He is unstoppable, unbeatable, unbelievable. He's Alex Richter, the Kung Fu Genius.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out! Word is, I'm a Kung Fu Genius. Practice all day like a genius.
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
I am superb.
Here we are on a Saturday morning. This is a kind of a rare time for us to record.
It's Saturday morning.
Yeah, not properly
I'm missing
caffeinated
all my cartoons
yet.
right
yeah,
now.
we're missing our cartoons.
Yeah.
We're not properly caffeinated.
We're
and
definitely not caffeinated.
We don't have the British guy here today
This
because he
is
got a case of the
sucky.
flu, right?
Yeah.
So we are our own sound people, all right?
Scary.
We don't have that. You're not going to hear the British guy chiming in from time to time. It's just going to be us.
Yeah.
So this is the first episode of KFG.
No.
We don't have the British guy with us.
This should be the last.
Yeah.
too.
Well, if it's really good, maybe we don't meet. You know what's funny? I had to do all the sound stuff, right? And he just sent me text with some basic like directions, right?
Yeah.
And I realized, you know what that dude does? All he does is press record.
That's all
That
he
dude
does.
doesn't do shit.
That's all
How much are we paying him? We don't need
paying
him.
cents by the hour.
He literally shows up, puts the headphones on. He's like, "Okay, I'm going to record," and he hits record. And maybe he deletes some old recordings to
And
make sure
maybe
there's enough
he
space.
pressed like a soundtrack here and there.
Yeah,
you know, if
exactly.
needed.
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's it.
That's all he's
What's
doing.
good?
He's getting paid cents on the dollar to do that, right?
Way overpaid.
Ridiculous.
My God.
All right,
right.
so anyway, let's get to it. What's our first one?
All right, first up, we got Anton Rasha,
All right.
like Rash Guard.
That's what's up.
All right. Hi, Mr. Kung Fu Genius. Regarding the Bruce Lee death, what do you think about this theory? He has a theory.
Yeah, everyone's got a theory.
Okay, not everyone.
Right.
I'm theoryless.
Uh-huh. The difference between practice and theory is bigger in practice than in theory.
I don't know where you came up with that, but I
deep.
remember. Yeah.
All right. I read it on the internet once.
Yeah. Using electrical muscle stimulation. Lee also used electrical muscle stimulation to train his muscle, which damaged his muscle at the same time. This machine was brought from Japan and was banned later. It used high voltage to stimulate muscle, which destroyed the balance between the nervous system and the biological system. It made Lee's muscles stronger in a short time, but it did more damage inside Lee's body. Damn. Coincidentally, an actor named Yuan Yi also used this machine and also died without reasons 1 year after Lee's death.
It was the electric stimulator in the kitchen theory, right?
I remember these. Is this the one with the little things?
Yeah, the things that they still use nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So-
the hospitals.
Yeah, so this is one of the many bandied about theories. Now, what you have to realize is that at the time of Bruce Lee's death, you know, Bruce Lee dies at 32 years old. So obviously people are looking and scrambling for reasons, right? And there's everything from like the sordid to the mundane, right? And the problem is that the problem with human beings when it comes to conspiracy theories is people would rather believe some type of conspiracy than no theory at all. People are very unsatisfied with the idea of we just don't know. People really don't like to hear that. And as a result, instead of to say that you don't know something or that you are not sure or there is not enough evidence to suggest, these are intellectually honest ways of looking at things. People don't like intellectual honesty. They want to have a reason. Why did Bruce Lee die? It was the electric stimulators. Why did Bruce Lee die? It was the cocaine. Why did Bruce Lee die? It was the heat stroke. Why did Bruce Lee die? It was Betty Ting Pei with a kitchen knife in the bedroom. You know what I mean? Because people don't like this idea that they don't know. So they will literally just fill in the gap with any conspiracy theory so that they feel like they have an answer because that puts them at ease. But truthfully, when you don't know something, you just got to say you don't know. Now, at any given moment, all right, any of us is doing some shit that could potentially kill us. All right?
Yeah.
Today, I drove my car into City Wing Chun. I could have potentially died on the way in, okay? From driving and be like, yeah, well, he was driving his car in the city. That's crazy, right? Okay? Imagine if I ride bikes, and I ride bikes in the city. That's very dangerous. Yeah, well, he was riding bikes. That could have killed him, right? Imagine, I'm taking...
I ride trains.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Exactly. Yesterday, I had a little bit of a lower back spasm, right?
Oh, no.
So I took some anti-inflammatories, all right? Imagine this morning if I woke up dead. Oh, well, he was taking all those anti-inflammatories, right? Or whatever. Even though that the real reason I'm dead is because I accidentally consumed rat poison that was in my sushi yesterday, all right? But no, it was the anti-inflammatories, right? So the thing is that people just want, and also people want to feel like they know something that the normal people don't know. Like when, people know that I've traveled to Hong Kong many times and, I'm kind of a bit of a Bruce Lee nerd and I've talked to a number of people who might know something about it. So they're like, Mr. KFG, in all your travels to the Orient, all right? I mean, it's legit when people call it the Orient. Please tell me, how did Bruce Lee die? As if having been over there, you could literally have been in Betty Ting Pei's bedroom that Bruce Lee died in. Yeah. And you are not privy to any more information than anyone who looks at this with a modicum of introspection, right? So the problem is that people put too much...
Bruce Lee don't even know how he died.
Bruce Lee doesn't even know how he died, right? People give too much credit to people who say something that sounds a little bit different. Ooh, that's something I haven't heard before. Therefore, it must be true. No, man. Man. It's true if it's true. All right? There are tons of plausible theories, all right? The heat stroke thing, the hypersensitivity to meprobamate, all of these theories. Now, the problem is let's say you say that there's 6 or 7 probable theories of Bruce Lee's death. That does not mean that there are 6 or 7 probable theories that are equally valid. The problem is that just because someone says, this is a theory of how he died, heat stroke, this is a theory of how he died, meprobamate, this is a theory of how he died, cocaine, doesn't mean that because you call those 3 things theory, that they're theories, that they're equally valid or equally plausible. All right? Just because they have a name of being a theory, all right, doesn't mean that they're all that there's equal chance that any of those could have happened, all right? We have to take a look at what we know, and we also have to acknowledge the fact that most of us who are talking about this are not medical doctors, all right? So again, as I've said many, many times, even though I've read Bruce Lee's autopsy and have a copy of it, I see that there are things missing from the toxicology report. When people say, "Oh, well, they didn't find cocaine in the system," I don't see cocaine on the toxicology report. There was some chucklehead who kept arguing with me, saying, "See, because they didn't find it, you idiot." He kept calling me an idiot, and I was like, "Dude,
what?"
Because he misunderstood. I didn't say they didn't find cocaine on the toxicology report like they looked for it and didn't find it. I mean, they didn't look for it.
Right.
He didn't understand that. He kept saying, I'm saying, yeah, the cocaine is not on his toxicology report, as if they didn't find it when they looked for it. They didn't look for it, homie. I don't see it. But again, my medical opinion, my my evaluation of an autopsy report done in Hong Kong in 1973. Dude, I'm not even qualified to give an evaluation of my driving test when I was 16 years old, let alone a medical autopsy of which I don't have any medical training. 2, I'm just reading this thing 50 years later. So, I mean, people are like, well, he's read the autopsy report. He must know.
You idiot.
Dude, all right? It's like giving me anything written in a lab and going, what do you think about this, right? What does it matter what I think about it? I'm an idiot, all right?
One thing I do know,
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor.
That's right. I do know that.
I know that for a fact.
I don't even play one on this podcast, all right? As much as people really want to hear what my opinion is, right? So one of the many bandied about theories, which I would put like if you're looking at the most plausible theories of Bruce Lee's death, and you trickle it down to like the just total not like he was killed by ninjas with the death touch or whatever kind of thing, right?
I love that one.
The muscle stimulation thing is one of the lower rung theories, okay? So first of all, he supposedly used some kind of muscle stimulator. And first of all, these kind of things are still available today, right? You have these, you can put them on your body, and then you have these stimulation. Usually people use it for more therapeutic uses, like, for, trigger point therapy and stuff like that. Like you have a problem in your shoulder, so you put those patches there, and then you slowly dial up. I mean, you go to a chiropractor or you go to a physical therapist, and they use those things on you all the time. They will use the electric muscle stimulation to loosen you up, and then they'll go and they'll manipulate you afterwards. So these are things that are still used nowadays. But supposedly the one that Bruce Lee used was one that was from Japan and then later became banned, okay? Now, the thing about that is this, okay? I don't know if that is actually true. So first of all, Bruce Lee apparently used some muscle stimulator, like some electric muscle stimulator. Most people talk about that. But again, I've never seen a photo of it. I've never seen a video of it, and I haven't seen any evidence where Bruce Lee says he was using this. Now, I'm not saying like I don't believe it's possible. Enough people have talked about it that it's probable. But first of all, where is the hard evidence that he used it? Second, yes.
Dragging the Bruce Lee story.
I know.
He had...
Yeah, so again, Linda was part of that movie, all right? And so she may have had that in the script that, Bruce was using these things at the time or whatever.
Yeah.
But Linda also put in that he broke his back fighting, Johnny, whatever his face, the Chinese guy with the jerry curls in a dungeon in San Francisco, right?
I love those.
So again,
guys.
if you're going to use dragging the Bruce Lee story and say, well, Linda Lee was attached to that movie, and in it they make reference to the electric stimulators. Yeah, in that movie he also got his back broken by a flying sidekick, okay? And then fought that guy again at Ed Parker's tournament in a ring, and then fought that guy's younger brother on the set of Big Boss. So let's go a little bit easy on using Dragon the Bruce Lee story as a reference point for anything regarding Bruce Lee, all right? But here's the thing.
Yeah.
I'll give the benefit of the doubt that he used muscle stimulation because there were enough people who said about it, and it's harmless enough to think like Bruce Lee might use something like this, okay? But then there's the one he was using was from Japan, and it was this one that was later banned, okay? So where is the evidence of that, okay? Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying that people say stuff like, yeah, he used this Japanese muscle stimulator, which was then later banned in Japan. Okay, so how do you know that? All right, is there a receipt for it? Now, I'm totally fine with that being true. But the problem with all these questions is you have to presuppose that 2 or 3 of the premises of the question are automatically true, and then you have to debate it as if it's standing on solid ground. I want to know, all right, how do we know that Bruce used this particular model? Now, if someone out there knows and can show that to me, I'm not saying he did not use it. I'm just saying I first need to find evidence that he did before we really even speculate on this stuff, all right?
I wonder if a collector has it.
Maybe, right? And then second of all, the guy says that this thing causes muscular damage. Well, that's how muscles are developed, all right? I mean, like, so first of all, how do you think you grow? How do you think you grow bigger biceps? All right, you're creating
gotta damage them,
creating muscle damage. All right, and it's in the anabolic phase, the muscle creating phase, that those are then strengthened and those muscles grow. All right, the muscles don't grow while you're doing the work. The muscles grow in the recovery. All right, during the anabolic phase of
hence
yes,
anabolic steroids.
Yeah, because anabolic steroids work during the anabolic phase, and they also work during recovery. All right, you don't get bigger muscles because you're pumping more. You get bigger muscles in the recovery. That's how it works. Yeah. Because your muscles go through phases: the catabolic, where it's breaking down, or anabolic, where it's building up.
So if I take anabolic steroids while not working out, that shit would not work. In any way whatsoever.
I don't know.
But this is a theory.
You'd have to watch Coach Greg videos to get more information on that, or watch More Plates, More Dates, or one of those, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I think if you took steroid, well, I think it depends, but I think if you took steroids without working out, you would just get bloated. You would just retain a lot of water. Yeah. Which is another reason why when people are like, yo, Bruce was on anabolic steroids. Why did he have no water retention?
Yeah, zero.
Why did he keep losing water if he was on anabolic steroids, you moron? So anyway, in order to really entertain this and any other theory for that matter, all right, I want to see the proof that he used these kind of things, these muscle stimulators. 2, I want to see the proof that he used this particular brand of Japanese muscle stimulator, and that this brand was in fact then later banned or whatever, right? Yeah. Now, of course, he says that the damage is between the nervous and the muscle system or whatever. I mean, look, it was the early 70s. Is it possible that they made an electric machine in the 70s that wasn't totally scientifically tested and ended up being bonkers bad for people? Absolutely. I have no problem believing that the premise of it could be true. I just don't know if it's actually true. That's the difference, all right? So if people can provide evidence that Bruce used this machine, it was indeed this machine from Japan that later then did get banned, okay, then we can look at it, all right? But does something that causes nerve damage, all right? Presumably he's using this on his arms or legs or his abs or his chest. Okay. Does something that supposedly cause nerve damage or cause a loss of connection between your nervous system and your muscles, all right? How does that cause cerebral edema? Okay, so here's the thing. Well, here's the thing. It might. There could be a medical doctor listening to this and going, well, actually, damage to your nervous system through the body can cause strains on the brain. Like, it's totally possible. But the problem is, my opinion on that is worth a zero, okay? A big zero, okay? Because I know nothing about this stuff, all right? So, again, people always want me to pontificate on things that I'm not qualified to talk about. And neither are they. But because everyone is talking about Bruce taking the meprobamate, and then he died from that, and then it's the heat stroke theory, and then, it's the cocaine. It's like, nah, man, actually, I'll tell you why Bruce Lee died. It was the Japanese muscle stimulator, all right? Okay? Right. So it sounds just like people always want to be like, yeah, well, everyone else is saying that thing, but let me tell you what it really is. It was the muscle stimulator in the kitchen at 3:00, all right? And so it just sounds like
in the kitchen.
Like the move, like Clue, right? Okay, it's like what killed Bruce Lee. It was Betty Ting Pei with the headache medicine in the bedroom, right? Oh, it was the butler Wu Ngan, right? So, so the problem is, it just sounds like people are just trying to come up with shit that other people are not talking about, just so you can sound like, because if you're the one person in the room that's like, nah, man, it wasn't heat stroke, it wasn't cocaine, it wasn't a probamate, man, let me tell you, all right? My boy Johnny in the Bronx, all right, he told me, his dad told me why Bruce Lee died. It was the Japanese muscle stimulator, all right? Okay? And then the other guy, Yuan Jie, which I think was his co-star in Game of Death. Yeah. All right? Not in the 79 Game of Death, because they cut out his part and James Tien, but he's the other guy there. He also died very early, okay?
I said a month after.
Yeah, or a year after, something like that. Yeah, thing is, okay, so that proves that it was a muscle stimulator? Like, people don't just die for whatever reason? Again, the problem is people would rather believe a conspiracy theory than no theory at all. Bruce Lee used this thing and died, even though perhaps his death has nothing to do with that. Someone else used this thing and died. Therefore, it has to. How do you freaking know that, right? This is called confirmation bias. You are beginning with the conclusion you want to reach, and then you are drawing the facts to reach the conclusion which you already reached. That is not a scientific way of looking at anything, right? You have to look at the facts, and if you want a scientific argument to be true, then you have to try to disprove it, and you fail to disprove it. Not that you select a handful of facts and then you go, see, all right? Because in that case, you could probably say both Bruce Lee and Yuan Jie liked sashimi. All right? So it was like some bad sashimi that killed them, right? They both practiced martial arts and took blows to the head. It was the blows to the head that killed them, right? They were both Chinese and in the movie Game of Death. It was Game of Death that killed them, right? Okay? Because of the curse, Bruce putting the word death in his films and stuff like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, again, you want to draw connections. I could probably draw 8 or 9 connections between the two of them that could possibly be the reason why they died, which wouldn't be any less plausible than the Japanese electric stimulator. All right? So anyway, this, along with a lot of other less plausible theories, it's like people need to stop thinking that just because they heard some shit, it's equally valid. All right? I also heard, Bruce Lee was killed by triads, hit with a baseball bat, and then his body was drugged there or whatever, right? And it sounds plausible.
Yeah.
But then you start putting things together, and then it really doesn't make any sense, all right? But it's easy for me to say, I was in Hong Kong, and a Hong Kong producer who knew an actor who knew Bruce Lee said that this was what happened, which is actually true. Still doesn't mean shit. Doesn't mean shit. His autopsy, he had no bruising or damage on his body to his head or whatever from any kind of trauma. There was no pre-death trauma and there was no post-death trauma.
This is what they look for.
This is what they look
automatically.
For. Of course, because they're looking for, they're looking for the reasons for it. So they're going to look for things like trauma and things like that.
Yeah.
There was none of that. All right. And then people always point to that autopsy photo of with his neck all messed up or whatever. But this is what happens
Dyson
when you
neck.
start cutting someone's head up behind and it folds this way here, right? So you can't look at what someone looks like on the autopsy table when they're all chopped up like this and go like, see, obviously he had head trauma because his neck is swollen, all right? Because if you get hit in the head, your neck is the thing that swells, all right? So anyway, I think this electric muscle stimulator it should get thrown in the trash bin of Bruce Lee death conspiracies.
Can I make a confession?
Yes.
I used one of those before.
What, getting hit in the back of the head?
No, electromagnetic or what? One of
those
things you
electric
put on-
muscles. Yeah, dude, I have two of those at home. Okay. Yeah, for like my shoulders and for my lower back. Yeah, but apparently the newer ones are much lower grade. You can dial it up slowly.
Yeah.
I think in the 70s, you just turned that thing on and that thing was going
I
like
had
this,
one
right?
with the gel.
Yeah.
The gel
No,
patches.
those things are really normal, but you can imagine, 50 years ago, the 50-year-ago version of that thing was probably a lot less refined. And probably people were putting them places that they shouldn't put them, right? Okay, like on their face or whatever.
Their rectal.
Yo, I wasn't even talking about that. Why you always got to take it there?
I'm just saying, you're trying to stimulate shit.
My God, man.
No.
You are a deviant.
No, but
You're a
these
deviant.
things, I'm not confessing that. I'm not saying
No,
I did
I get it.
What
I
I'm
get
saying
it.
is,
yeah, sounds
I
totally
didn't get jacked from it.
right. Sounds like you're not hiding anything, right?
No,
Except that stimulator up your ass.
Got to stimulate.
All right, that's right. Okay, cool. So anyway, I think it's a bullshit theory. I think,
man.
But I think that if you want to go down that route, I need to see more receipts, man.
Yeah,
I
receipts.
need to see more receipts.
Show the
on that.
receipts.
Show the receipts. All right. Next question.
He did save a lot of receipts, but not that one.
Yeah.
All right, Lion Martial Arts Academy.
All right.
You might have already went in depth on this,
Okay.
and I might have missed it. But if you haven't, can you share some more of the long pole drills you can do when you're by yourself?
Well, it's difficult to do in an audio podcast. All right.
Okay. Oh, yeah,
Where
you can't
it's
really,
two talking heads here, right?
The room is not even big enough for a
And
long pole in
about
here.
about a quarter of our audience listens to this podcast on audio.
True. You can't see it.
Yeah, but 3/4 of our audience watches this on YouTube, but about 1/4 of the audience only listens to it on like Spotify, iTunes, wherever. Wherever audio.
Podbean.
Yeah, wherever audio podcasts are distributed. I'm literally everywhere,
Yeah.
right? They're even like German podcast apps. I'm like on all of those things, right? So the problem is like in an audio format podcast. One of the things about the Kung Fu Genius podcast, which I think irritates a small percentage of our listeners, is this is not a platform for me to teach the Wing Chun that I teach. Okay. So I never wanted to create the Kung Fu Genius podcast to go like, all right, look, this is how you should do Siu Nam Tao. This is how you should do Chum Kyu. This is how you should do Chi Sao, right? Because what Heath Ledger's Joker say, right? He says, if you're good at something, never do it for free. All right. Okay. And so when I teach teaching Wing Chun is my profession. Okay. Doing a podcast, this is what I do for fun because, after Dudes of Kung Fu, I realized I kind of like talking about this shit in front of an audience. I think some people like to listen to it. And especially with the Ask Me Anything format, it allows me to kind of answer a lot of the questions that people are thinking about who are into Bruce Lee, Wing Chun, all these kind of things that we talk about, right? But this was never a platform for me to go, okay, now I have an audience. Now let me show you like the real way to do Pak Sao, all right? If people want to learn Wing Chun from me, they can come to City Wing Chun here in New York. They can learn from me online and do lessons with me. I do lessons through Zoom with people from all over the world, Wing Chun instructors and noobs, whatever. And so that's essentially how I earn my living. And it's not to say that I don't want to teach Wing Chun for free on my podcast, but I don't want to teach Wing Chun for free on my podcast because it's like literally the most thankless thing you can do is offer help and offer advice. And then everyone's going to, well, actually, you should do it like this. You should do it like that, right? And even on my Instagram, like there are people who are pissed off that I'm just doing those silly Kung Fu reels where it's just me and Svetlana doing a bunch of fake Kung Fu. But it's like, her. I did a couple like, here's how you should do this thing in the wooden dummy or whatever, and they get a pretty moderate response. But then I do a 4-second clip with her doing fake ass Kung Fu and I get 2 million views. So in terms of building my audience, which one do you think I'm going to do, right? Yeah. Because it hasn't hurt my bottom line in terms of teaching Wing Chun, right? Okay. People who want to learn Wing Chun from me come to New York or they learn from me online, right? This is not the platform for that. The Kung Fu Genius podcast is for discussion about all things Bruce Lee, Wing Chun, Jeet Kune Do, things that are interesting and also things that work in an audio format, right? This is not okay, let me stand up and show you how to do long pole, right? Yeah. Okay.
Someone driving their car is going to be like, ah!
I know, exactly. I got to go home and watch this on YouTube now, right?
He bastard.
So, and it's not to throw any shade on the questioner there, but like that's literally not what I'm doing here, right? If people want to learn long pole from me and they're qualified, they can come and learn long pole from me either here in New York or do an immersion course with me in Florida or learn from me online, right? But to answer the question, I mean, one of the things that you can do with the long pole when you do not have a partner is you can take one of the wooden dummy arms out of the wooden dummy and put a long pole in there instead. And then so you essentially have a long pole sticking out of the wooden dummy, and then you can use that for your basic training against another pole, right? So like for your basic sparring, fukguan, tanguan, learning to stick to the weapon as you go down, when you defend with things like fukguan or tanguan or something like that, and then you go to hit the person, you want to make sure that you maintain contact with the weapon. Well, if you have a long pole sticking out of a wooden dummy, you can kind of use that almost like as a pole dummy, which they have in some other styles like Siu Lam Wing Chun. They have a pole dummy, but I think it has like 6 poles coming at them, so you can do all these different things. So you can create like apparatuses to put the poles in and things like that. Obviously, a partner and a qualified instructor are really the most important things to have, right? In terms of the solo strength training, those things are pretty standardized. I mean, if you learn Wing Chun long pole from a qualified sifu, your sifu should be able to show you all the basic strength training, cao guan, dang guan, lan guan, or biu guan, all those kind of things, and jin kun, arrow punches and all. Like all that stuff's pretty standard. Like that, like there's not like if you learn 6 or 7 basic strength training exercises with the long pole, learning 9 or 10 of them isn't going to make you that much better, all right? Okay. Better you just learn those basic ones and you get really, really good at it, and then you put that stuff into practice, right? The thing with long pole practice is that it's the same like any other pursuit. It's just about consistency over time. There really not a lot of hacks where you're going to suddenly jump your skill into long pole, because the long pole has the added disadvantage in that you're holding something that has weight while you're trying to learn fine motor movements. Yeah. Normally, when you learn fine motor movements, at least in Chinese martial arts, you do it solo first, meaning you just do it by yourself without the presence of a partner or anyone else, right? And then you start to do it in some kind of cooperative partner practice. So you learn how to take that thing from the form and do it with another live person. And then as you get better at that, you progressively learn how to use it when the other guy is resisting you, right?
Yeah.
So the long pole has one disadvantage in that progression, in that you're already starting to learn the fine motor movements, even when you do it solo, but you're doing it with an apparatus, which means you're already starting under a little bit of physical stress. All right. So that's why it's actually a good idea to do some solo long pole stuff without the long pole in your hand, where you can work the fine motor movements. Or, and I know it sounds like sacrilege, get a really light, tiny, short staff to do the basics on. So you can just do them like in a very perfect way, because you're not worrying about the added weight. The moment you add weight, you have to compensate a little bit to keep the pole in the right position. So even though obviously there's so much macho bullshit in Wing Chun about how big your pole is, right? Because no one in Wing Chun is compensating, right? You know how many times like people ask me like, how long should the pole be in Wing Chun? Well, in Yip Man Wing Chun, we generally use a pole that's about 8.5 feet or 9 feet. In WT, the 9-foot long pole, the bigger one, is obviously heavier. That's usually the one you use for the strength training. You do your form and you do your strength training with a 9-footer. But then when you spar, you use an 8.5-foot pole. It's just a tiny, I mean, there's not much of a difference in terms of the length. And they're a little bit lighter. So it's almost like running with a weight vest on, so that when you actually run without the weight vest, you're much faster, right? So I would suggest like you should have a super light pole to do technical training that you don't have to worry about the weight.
Okay.
And then have a heavier pole for your strength training, and then a lighter pole for your sparring. All right. So you have 3 different weights. Although the lightest one doesn't have to be a full-length pole. It can just be a staff or something, like a short 6-foot rattan staff or something, just to get the movements
Technical
with, right?
practice.
Yeah. So that's a suggestion for me as far as that stuff goes. But every time we talk about them, like, oh yeah, the long pole should be about 8.5 or 9 feet long. There's always like, oh, well, actually, this one line in Yip Man Wing Chun uses an 11-foot pole. All right. Cool story, bro. Like. Well, I guess you're just 2 feet better than me then.
Yeah.
All right?
Damn.
Because it's all this macho bullshit about how strong you are. Yeah, well, we actually use my Sifu uses an 11-foot pole that's made out of the heaviest wood, and it has a metal rod in it, and it's made with the hopes and souls of small children, so it's heavier than Thor's hammer.
Shit is iron.
All right, yeah. You know, it's
Iron
like, okay,
pole.
it reminds me of a story, and I remember, I might have told this on Dudes, or I might have told this on an earlier episode of KFG.
Yeah.
I was once at the Museum of Natural History here in New York with Sifu Leung Tang.
Yeah, okay.
Years ago. And they had a room which was like, or at that time, maybe they still do, I assume they do. They have a kind of a war room where they show like armor and weaponry from different cultures throughout like the history, right?
All right.
And there was a room that had like Chinese weapons, but of course it's a museum, so it's like real stuff it's like, you know, actual artifacts and things. So they had like Chinese armor and they had Chinese weapons. And I went in there with Sifu Leung Ting, and they had you know, one display there where there was some armor, and there was a the Quan Dao, right?
Yeah.
The one that General Quan holds, right?
Right.
Okay, which is basically in Western weaponry, I think it's called a halberd, right? Which is basically a staff with a sword at the end of it, with a little sword at the end of it, right? But it wasn't massive. When I saw it, it was actually really small. So the staff wasn't super big. It wasn't like super long. And the knife at the end, or the blade or the sword, wasn't like this huge swooping thing that you see in kung fu schools.
Oh, right.
You know, because when you see when you see the Kwando in most kung fu schools, the pole is longer, and the sword at the end is very broad, sometimes really big, and sometimes they even have a blade on the other end or a spike on the other end, and they'll have tassels and all sorts of shit, right? When I saw this real one, you know, it's like super old, it was small. The blade wasn't that big. And I remember, like, I looked at that and I'm like, Xigong, like, wow, the Guando looks so small. And he looked at me and he goes, no, that's the real one.
That's the real one.
He said, if you're fighting in the battlefield and you have a really heavy weapon that you cannot move around, you are going to die. Right? And then so it was so funny because although obviously in Wing Chun we focus on Bachamdo and long pole, right? We only have 2 weapons. There's a lot of the other Shaolin styles, Siulam Kung Fu, Hong Kun, all these guys, they have like all these different weapons, 18 weapons, 36 weapons, 140 million weapons, right? Yeah. And there is like this kind of macho thing about, I'm not just doing it with a kwando, I'm doing it with a really heavy ass kwando, right? I'm not just using these butterfly swords. These are really heavy butterfly swords. I'm not just using a 9-foot long pole. I'm using a 13-foot long pole with, metallic rods that's made with metal shards and it's so hardcore. It cuts my hands every time I use it, but that's how hardcore I am,
Massive anime sword.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like people, like they because that's just macho bullshit about how strong you are and how big you are. And then in that moment, like I'm thinking about all these weapons and all these sifus bragging about how big and heavy their weapons are. And then Sifu Leung looking at me in that moment and going like, if you had a heavy weapon on the battlefield, you'll die. How are you going to wield a weapon? How are you going to change a weapon? How are you going to change directions quickly on the battlefield when you have this heavy ass weapon that's just for the sake of showing other people how strong you are? And then he said to me, he goes, this is a problem in Chinese martial arts because all of these sifus want to show how strong they are. And all of these sifus want to show how, hardcore they are. So they use these really heavy bachamdo or they use these really heavy guando or these really heavy swords because when they put it in someone else's hand and they feel how heavy it is, then you go like, wow, this dude is really hardcore. and then he said, which I thought was really interesting, and he goes, don't forget, none of the modern day sifus are actually fighting with these weapons. So what are they doing with them? You're practicing with them. You're playing with them. You are miming what you would do theoretically if you were on a battlefield 500 years ago, of which you have no experience and are actually, in fact, not.
Damn.
All right? So what do? It's just
unless they go through a time machine.
Exactly. The Dre Ison hypothetical, maybe, right? But it's just like strength training. You have progressive resistance, all right? You start with the 5-pound dumbbells and then the 10-pound and 15 and 20 and 25, right? So if you practice Kung Fu for any period of time, you start with the small weapon, the light one, and then you build up to a heavier one and a heavier one and a heavier one until you are lifting something and using something that's really quite impressive. And then you put that in the hands of a noob and they're like, holy shit, how do you do this? But what they are impressed with is nothing more than progressive resistance training that you've done over time. It's just like a bodybuilder, giving a dumbbell that they use to someone who's been in the gym for only a few months, right? But that doesn't mean that necessarily that the ability to lift that weight translates to athletic performance, right? It's just you have been doing it longer, right? The other day, I follow Chris Bumstead on Instagram. He's like,
never heard of him.
He's like the top bodybuilder. He's like the Mr. Olympia bodybuilder, right?
Yeah.
He's like the current. Again, he's just a freak of nature. He's got amazing genetics. I mean, these are guys that Arnold Schwarzenegger could be his Tony Stark inside, Chris Bum's Iron Man suit, right? This is like the new gen is like so big, right? Damn. But he posts all this stuff with him training, and then the other day he was talking about Bulgarian split squats, right? And
I think I ran across.
I reposted it. It's basically you have one leg on a bench, and then you're basically doing a one-legged squat with two dumbbells. It's one of my favorite exercises, but it's very difficult because you have to stabilize. It's painful, but it's one of the best ways to like build up your legs and ass, right? And he's talking about how when he started doing it, he hated them because everyone hates them at first. But then he did them so much, he started to love them, right? And then there's just a photo of him like squatting down on one leg. Yeah. And then you look at the dumbbells he has, and each dumbbell was 140 pounds. All right. Now, the problem is most people couldn't even lift 140 pounds split on two dumbbells. They wouldn't be able to have 70 pounds in each hand and do a Bulgarian split squat, right? Let alone in each hand having that much weight, right? But the thing is that if you were a normal person just trying to get fit, you wouldn't have to lift that much damn weight to get benefit out of a Bulgarian split squat, right? So for me, when some macho sifu puts like some heavy ass weapon in your hands, all right, that's just like Chris Bumstead if he went up to someone who was even relatively fit but not in a Mr. Olympia bodybuilder and said, you need to do Bulgarian lifts with these weights, all right? And so that really doesn't make sense for that individual. But now when we put it back to the realm of weapon fighting, all right, you're on the battlefield, all right? They're men on horses. They have armor. You need to be able to move. You need to be able to change directions. Yeah. And someone puts a heavy-ass kwando in your hands, says, good luck, kid, and then runs away, all right? Or you have one that's really sharp, but lighter, and you can move around and you can wield it. Which one would you rather have, right? So there's a lot of macho bullshit about the heft of your weapon, which, you know, when Sifu Leung told me that, I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, there's all this macho stuff because basically all these Sifus are just, strength training with weapons over time, so they could do it with heavier and heavier weapons. But this is moving away more and more from what the original aims of doing those fighting with those weapons are. And even in the Wing Chun knives, all right, the which sometimes people call wudipdo, which means butterfly swords, but technically in Wing Chun we don't call them butterfly swords, which is why I always laugh when people are like, you do the Wing Chun butterfly swords, bro?
Yeah.
All right, because in Wing Chun, at least Yip Man Wing Chun, we do not call them butterfly swords. It's what they're called in Hong Kong or other martial arts, right? Usually we just call them Seung Do. Seung Do means double knives.
Yeah.
Or they're called Bao Chang Do. Bao means it covers to your elbow, meaning that's only as long as your arm there. That's what the knives are called. Ba Cham Do is the name of the techniques, the name of the form. It's not really the name of the knife itself. The knife is called Bao Chang Do or just Seung Do, but you shouldn't call it butterfly swords, right? Or butterfly knives, right? And people also confuse about the knives and swords. In Chinese, the word is the same. That's why, you know, some people say that the Wing Chun knives, sometimes the Wing Chun swords, because there are two words in Chinese for sword. All right? One is do, the other one is kim. Do means a blade that is sharp on one side and is broad. So a butter knife is a do.
Is a do.
All right. Our Wing Chun knives are a do because they're sharp on one side and they're broad.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Then you have the literally the broad sword is a do. All right. But then, you know, in Tai Chi they have those straight swords.
Yeah.
And those are sharp on both sides and they're straight. That's called a kim. All right. So those are the two different
double-sided.
Yeah. And so a butter knife is a do. But so is the Wing Chun knives. That's why sometimes when Cantonese or Chinese people translate, some will say sword, some will say knife, because it's technically the same word in Chinese.
Yeah.
All right. This in English, we would normally consider a knife something that was shorter, and we would consider a sword something that's longer. But then with the case of the Bacham Do, is it a sword or a knife? Because it's kind of like a long knife or a short sword. It could be either one, right?
Some dude in the kitchen, hey, pass me that do.
Yeah, pass me the sword.
Hey, what the hell?
Yeah.
I need a butter knife, man.
That's right.
What you doing?
So the in the history of that type of fighting, you know, those weapons, especially even in the early 20th century, were still being used by triads. And even here in New York, there was some, you know, Eddie Gong, this like famous triad guy back in the 30s.
Eddie Gong.
Yeah, there's a photo of him. He was one of the Tong leaders. So in Hong Kong, they called them triads. That's what they call the gangsters over there. And in overseas Chinese, they call them tongs, right? Because this is like a name for like a group, right? They didn't call them triads here. Triads are in Asia. In the States, those gangs are tongs, Tong, right?
Right.
And so Eddie Gong was like some Tong leader here in Chinatown, but like in the 20s or 30s. And there's a photo of him like with like Western style glasses, and he's wearing a Western style suit, and he's holding the two swords, the two butterfly swords, and they're very narrow and thin, right? And there's also like a photo from the NYPD, I think from the 20s or 30s, where they confiscated a bunch of weapons from some tongs in Chinatown.
Yeah.
And you see like chains and brass knuckles and knuckle dusters, and then you see the knives, the do, but they're actually very long and thin. So they're more like the stabber type, right? So around 1971, 1972, Modo magazine in Hong Kong. They were a martial arts magazine, but not as big as New Martial Hero. Mo means martial, and Do means way. So martial way. In Japanese, it's Budo. All right, but in Cantonese, it would be Modo. That was the name of the magazine. And they wanted to do an article on the Wing Chun knife techniques. And so they contacted a young Leung Ting because at that time he was very popular in the press. So they asked him to do an article on the Wing Chun Bacham Do. So Leung Ting went to Yip Man to get a little bit more information so that he would have more stuff to talk about in the article. And one of the things that Yip Man was super adamant about was that you do not flip the knives, right? That was like a big thing. because, it's talking about, look, in the middle of fighting, if you flip the knives, there's a chance you're going to drop them, and you drop your knives in the middle of the fight. This is not going to work,
you
right?
Die, yeah.
You die, right? And he even said that Yip Man even talked about how some triad members who use those kind of knives in real fights, before they would go into battle, they would actually wrap their hands around the knife handle, so they would basically, their knives in their hands were inseparable, so that they wouldn't lose them. And he said, so think about it, these are people who are going into battle, and they would even tie their hands so that they wouldn't lose the knives. And think about then, why would you then, in the middle of a form, start flipping the knives and doing things like this, right?
Okay.
And so it seems that Yip Man would strongly advocated not flipping the knives, and that's been kind of a huge source of contention, because some of the lines within Yip Man Wing Chun, they actually flip the knives, and but according to many of Yip Man students, and even this article that came out, which got a lot of information from Yip Man personally, you never flip the knives. Now, the late Sifu Chan Chi Man, who's a close student of Grandmaster Yip Man, I also learned the Bacham Do form, the version that he learned, right, which was earlier on. And in his version, he actually flipped the knives in, I think it was set 7, all right?
All right.
And then later I asked him about that. And then he said, I said, so you flipped the knives there. Was that something that, Yip Man taught or advocated? And then Chan Chi Man said, no. He goes, I added that. He goes, because in the original one, you just step back and cut, which we already had in the form. He goes, he just added the flip because he said it's good for dexterity and movement. All right. And in the form, since most of us are not actually using these knife forms to protect ourselves on the street, they are to a certain degree providing coordination and physical movement and things like that. So even the late Chan Chi Man admitted that the quick flips he has in set 7 of his form, he just added that in later just to kind of, add a little bit of movements and dexterity into the form or whatever, right?
Right.
So, but Yip Man was very strongly advocated not flipping the knives. Hey everyone, it's the Kung Fu Genius, aka Alex Richter, and I just want to let you know that if you're a Wing Chun practitioner, especially from the WT or Leung Ting line, and you want to get really personalized intensive private training with me, you can now apply to do an immersion course with me here in NYC, or if you like the sun, in my Florida home near Orlando. These courses are for instructors or anyone who's serious about learning the art in detail and working hard. I teach in program blocks like Sunam Tao, Chamkyu, Biuchi, and Wooden Dummy, and those include the Chi Sao theory, fighting applications, and training methods as well. If you're really serious about learning Wing Chun, check out the link in the description below to find out about applying for a spot. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius on YouTube, like this video, and share it on your social media platforms. And with that, let's get started. All right, so next question.
Next question, we got Officer Philosopher.
All right.
Okay,
That's
he's
back.
back.
That's a tongue twister.
I love that. I was practicing that whole time in my head while you were telling me about that story.
Modo.
Are there any particular resistance training exercises you would recommend for a middle-aged beginner to develop power specifically for Wing Chun?
So I assume meaning fitness training.
Mm-hmm. I would assume the same.
Right. Well, there's really nothing different from being middle-aged to being young.
Nothing?
In terms of doing different stuff. The one thing you have to understand about being older, which I understand very well, is you can do the same stuff you did when you were 20. You just need, 1, to warm up more, and 2, you need more recovery time. All right, but that doesn't mean that you can't do certain things or whatever. Now, of course, when you're older, you've also probably accumulated some injuries and some impingements and things like that. So you know that there are certain things that your body does not want to do and certain things that you should stay away from. So you have to listen to your body. Obviously, if you have shoulder issues and rotator cuff issues, maybe you don't want to do shoulder presses, or you have other, bicep tears, or whatever you have going on from however you used or abused your body. You have to make sure that your exercise regimen takes that into consideration. You definitely need to warm up. One of the things that I do now, which wasn't necessary when I did any kind of strength training before, is I warm up for 10 minutes before I lift any kind of weights.
All right.
So, I'll just get on the rower and just do 10 minutes.
A 10-minute granny roll.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be crazy, but you just want to make sure that your body is warm, or, you just take laps around the school, or you do jumping jack, but do about 10 minutes of really light warm up, super light cardio, just to make sure that your body's warm before you start picking stuff up or whatever, right? Okay. In reality, so much has been talked about, like skill-specific strength training and functional training and things like that, people have gone like from the old days where like strength training was basically just doing bodybuilding stuff.
Right.
And then later strength training, or the more modern iteration of strength training, is like powerlifting and so-called functional training, that, people go like, oh, why would you do bicep curls? Because that's not a functional thing. You got to do, everything's got to be, you got to be pushing a tire, you got to be swinging ropes, you got to be jumping and climbing and stuff like that for it to be quote unquote functional. And I think that everything you do in terms of physical movement, especially if you're doing that in addition to martial arts, is going to be beneficial. Some Wing Chun people think like, okay, well, in Wing Chun we punch straight, so we just need to train the muscles for punching in a straight line. So you need to train like the front of your deltoid to hold up your arm. You need to train your tricep and your lats to be able to punch. And then so they only want to go to the gym and do stuff that is conducive to Wing Chun movements, right? I'm only going to kick in a straight line, so I only need to do squats this way. I'm only going to be punching straight forward on a sagittal plane, so I'm only going to do presses that go in this one direction. And I would actually say, don't do that. All right. Now, my advice 20 years ago would have been like, if you go to the gym, the only thing you should be doing at a gym is stuff that looks like your Wing Chun, but with weights or resistance, right? And now I'm almost of the opposite opinion of that. And the reason is that because if you train Wing Chun regularly, you're hitting the wall bag, you're doing your forms, you're doing Chi Sao, you're doing your Wing Chun practice, then those muscles you need to get for Wing Chun are getting worked, because they're getting worked in your Wing Chun practice. Yeah. So like I talked about, I think 2 episodes ago, so what is then the risk for people who are doing Wing Chun for a long time is always overuse. It doesn't matter what martial art you do. You do, Wing Chun people come, oh, my shoulder's this or whatever. Yeah, do jiu-jitsu for 2 years and then talk to me what happens to your body after that, right? Right. And talk to me about overuse and just stuff ripping apart or whatever, right? So it doesn't matter what martial art you do. If you're doing it with any kind of consistency, you're probably going to get some kind of overuse injuries in those planes of movement and motion that you use regularly, right? So actually, it's my advice that if you go to a gym or go into a gym or you do workout to complement your Wing Chun, it should not only be stuff that looks like what you do in the Wing Chun practice room. Because trust me, if you're practicing Wing Chun regularly, you're getting enough stimulation on those muscles that you need to do Wing Chun. Okay. So it's actually a good idea to do the stuff that you don't do in Wing Chun when you go to the gym.
Parkour.
No, I'm just saying, like, for example, pull-ups. Okay. Yes, we pull in Wing Chun. We have laps out, but we never pull directly to us, or you should not be pulling directly to you. So some people might think, well, why do I need to pull? Because in Wing Chun, everything is, punching, moving forward or whatever. Yeah, you need to pull because you're doing so much moving forward kind of stuff. You understand what I'm saying? Balance it out. Exactly. So I would say that if you are going to practice any kind of strength training to complement your Wing Chun, it can be a normal plain Jane fitness routine. It does not need to be anything special, right? People assume, like, when they see me in the opening or whatever, like, oh, my training is all this, like, highly... I do, like, normal fitness stuff. Presses, bicep curls, tricep extensions, abs, squats, but...
The basics.
The basics, right? I pick stuff up, I lift it, and I do that for reps, right?
And you put it back down.
And then I put it back down, right? But I also hit a wall bag. I also hit a heavy bag. I also row. I also use the bike. So I do cardio. I do all sorts of other stuff. And you do not need to do what I do to be happy or fulfilled. Everyone's like, oh, I want to do what that guy does. And you don't want to do what I do, all right? Because a lot of people will ask me, how do I get in shape, or how do I lose weight, or what do you do? All right. I posted my routines on Instagram a few months ago. They're still there. If you go to at Kung Fu Genius on Instagram, if you look in I have you have those stories where the saved stories on your profile, right?
Yes.
There's one fitness, and if you want to go there, I actually show my entire workout routine for a week. All right. And a lot of people, thumbs up and liked it or whatever. I guarantee you 0 people actually did it. All right. No. Because people always want to know, well, how do I lose weight? How do I get in shape? Okay, I'm going to tell you something. If you're an adult, you know how. You know how. All right?
Yeah.
You eat less, and you do more.
Yeah.
All right? You got to
So
lower
simple.
what you're eating, and you got to create a higher calorie expenditure and work more, right? So, people know you go to a gym, you get a personal trainer, go online, get some routine. There's no magic to it. Things, you just have to do it.
Yeah.
All right? But people are like, well, I tried going to a gym. You tried going for a gym for a month, and then you stopped going. All right? That's why you're not in shape.
Right.
All right? Because you expected that after 2 gym sessions, you were going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? No. You got to put in the work day in and day out. All right?
Over
and so
time.
for a middle-aged person or an older person, you just need to make sure you warm up before whatever you do. And you just need to make sure you give yourself enough recovery and that you're getting enough sleep and you're drinking enough water. But besides that, you can do anything anyone else is doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next up, we got Lucas.
All right.
Like Lucas.
Lucas. But
Yeah.
Lucas.
Lucas, yes.
Right, okay.
All right. Have you incorporated or developed any unorthodox equipment training into your teaching? Example, kicking tires, use of boxing training devices. Okay. Also, please call out Philip Hartshorn or Hartshorn. His WC is garbage, and he is a sham filmmaker. His only IMDb credit is something he made. Ooh.
All right.
I don't even know who this person is, but
I vaguely
I'm
know who
sure
this guy is.
you know
Yeah.
who he is.
Yeah, no, vaguely. Okay, so for the first one, yeah, I mean, like, there are a lot of backyard training gyms that, they use, like, tires for practicing the Wing Chun kick. Sometimes they'll take a tire and they'll cut it in a quarter. So you have,
What?
like, a quarter of a tire, and then you'll put it, like, you'll wedge it against a wall,
Yeah.
and then you can do kicks into it, right? So it gives you a little bit of feedback. That stuff is super cool, right? Like it's kind of...
I haven't seen this
kind
yet.
of like low-tech kind of garage gym kind of stuff, or you have different types of, like, improvised equipment or whatever. I'm very basic when it comes to that stuff, right? That stuff is all super, super cool, but ultimately, if you have a heavy bag, like a Muay Thai bag that goes almost all the way to the floor, you can do all your kicks on that. You can kick on a wall bag. The problem is, like, there's something in martial arts called sexy training. I've talked about it before. When you, for example, you're about to watch a UFC, and then they have, like, the highlights of that fighter's training leading up to the fight, and then what do you see? You see that fighter, like, doing wind sprints with a parachute behind them, like, to slow them down, and you see them doing all this kind of crazy strength and conditioning stuff, and people go like, wow, look at all this, like, really intense and unorthodox training stuff. Well, most of those fighters will tell you that's literally the stuff their strength and conditioning coach does when the cameras come, because they're looking for something that looks cool. It's why it's called sexy training. But they will say that actually when the cameras aren't rolling, they're doing normal strength training, they're doing normal bag work, they're doing normal sparring, they're doing normal technical training. But of course, when a UFC producer comes in and they want to shoot these kind of like these behind the scenes things that they do, they're gonna like do all the crazy stuff, all the crazy training that makes it just looks cool. Because also, like, the trainer is trying to sell what they do, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff. I actually really like how a lot of MMA guys train, because they have to work on so many different things. Their physical conditioning, their coordination, hand-eye coordination, reaction speed. So it's not just about lifting a bunch of weights or whatever. But I would say that there is an overemphasis on cool-looking stuff, even in Chinese Kung Fu. Like, if you're not training with a rattan ring and kicking a tire, or using a mattress on the wall to slam your partner in, like, it's just not grimy enough. Oh, you're just using heavy bags and wall bags. Oh, you're just using focus mitts and kick shields. How 2000 and late, right? We're doing, and it's like, I don't think that I don't think you get such a huge benefit from doing those things where it, like, justifies the use, right? Even things like, for example, putting the mattress on the wall, all right, which is something that some people do. For example, when you're practicing Chi Sao or Gao Sao and you launch your partner using first attack or Po Pai or shoulder launch, any of these kind of things where you launch your partner, they'll put padding on the wall, which we have padding on the wall upstairs, mainly so that you guys don't kill each other while you're sparring. But sometimes people will put like a really thick padded wall, a mattress or something on the wall, and slam the students into it so that you have something to slam into. That stuff looks really cool, but I'll tell you, it actually trains a very dangerous habit. And I talk about it in my book, The 15 Chi-Sao Fundamentals. In fact, I think I use you as the photo dummy for it or whatever, right? Is that if you get pushed, which happens all the time in fighting, you could get shoved, you could get tossed, you could lose your balance. You know, this idea that, you're going to root your stance and absorb everything or whatever, this is something, if you've had practical experience, then you understand that a bigger, stronger person can always push you back and make you move, right? This is only an ideal by people who only practice within their own martial art, that they can't be moved or can't be pushed. But if you get pushed, it's very important that you learn how to catch your balance when you're falling backwards. All right. So, for example, you're standing there, you're fighting, or you're doing Chi-Sao or Gao-Sao, whatever, and your partner launches you with the first attack or whatever, and you lose your balance. You have to take a step back. You have to know how to properly step back to brace yourself and catch your balance. And that's something that needs to be practiced regularly. Otherwise, you will not have it as a skill. You will have it in theory, but you won't have it as a skill. So that's why we use the steps from the Pachamdo, the reverse steps, to catch our balance. It's a different weight distribution, 60-40. The stance is wider. It's 2 tracks, and this is like for gaining your balance when you get pushed back. Yeah. And this is something not just taught in Wing Chun, but even like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu teaches this. Like when you get pushed, how to deal with a shove. We'd take initial step has to be really long so that you don't end up taking a bunch of short steps. And there's like a right way and a wrong way to do those things. You need to practice that every time you get pushed, all right? If you're doing Chi-Sao, Gao-Sao, your partner manages to get you or push you or whatever, you cannot stumble back on your feet. You need to take a proper back step and decide whether to either re-engage right away or you just stand there and make the guy come back to you, right? But you need to know how to brace yourself when you're pushed. If you have a mattress behind you, all right, and the goal is that every time I launch you, I'm going to launch you with impunity. I'm going to launch you so hard that I need to have a mattress on the wall so you don't slam yourself, all right? Then what happens is the students get a subconscious reaction that every time they get pushed, they kind of lean back for the mattress behind them and then kind of bounce off. And when you see people who partake in that kind of training, whenever they get pushed by their partner, they literally kind of almost stiffen up their legs, lean back with their upper body, hit the mattress, and then bounce back off. And they do it every single time because they know that there's a mattress behind them. So what habit is this teaching you when you get pushed? It's like those trust exercises, all right? Yeah. But then the people don't catch you, all right?
They're not there.
So that's why
that moment,
you have some kind of stuff. It's like, oh, yeah, you got to have a padded wall so you can slam your students in there. No, you have to have a padded wall in case your students get slammed into the wall. Yeah. So you don't have a hole in your wall. But if that training is now contributing to an idea that every time I get pushed in Chi-Sao or Gao-Sao, I just kind of lean, boom, boom, and bounce off the wall, you are training that hour after hour, rep after rep, to be part of how you react. So sometimes these cool, innovative, sexy bits of training can actually have the opposite effect. All right? And then the last bit there about calling out that Phil Hartshorn guy, right?
Yes.
I don't know. This? I don't know much about. I know that we've gotten some. IG? I know we've gotten some students because of him. Because he has such a huge reach. He's like someone who's got a very big channel. And
I think I know who this guy is.
But I think that he was doing some other stuff before, like he was doing some filmmaking stuff on YouTube or whatever. And then he does Wing Chun as a hobby. So he's not a Wing Chun instructor. He's not, he's not anyone who's going to be featured in Wing Chun Illustrated that anyone cares about, right? No one in the Wing Chun world is going to go, well, what does Phil Hartshorn think about Paksao in this application? What are his thoughts on Gao? No one is asking because he's just like a Master Wong. He's just kind of like an entertainer who uses Wing Chun as a medium, right? Okay. And so he went to the temple and shot a bunch of like really fake videos of him pretend sparring with these guys or whatever. And those are the videos that get a bajillion views because as I'm learning on social media now, the faker, the more people want to. I show these videos like, okay, here's how you should do set 3 on the dummy. You need to make sure you slide on the arm or whatever. 10,000 views, right? Create a super fake choreography with Svetlana, where she spins around and all I do is block using Wing Chun hands, which I would never do, by the way. 2 million views, all right? So you go like, and that's really what why people get irritated. Because the more sensationalistic, the more BS it is, the more people will watch it because people comment and say that it's BS, and that gives it more views. You know what I mean? So he's not really a Wing Chun guy from what I understood. I think he's learned some Wing Chun from someone at some point.
Okay.
All right.
He's a student.
But he's got bajillion views on his YouTube, so he's got to be doing something right. All right. Meanwhile, I'm actually having conversations about, martial arts or whatever, and we got, maybe 6,000 subscribers or something like that, right? But if I went to China and, went up to some fake Shaolin monk there at the Shaolin temple and had him kick me and, then that thing would have 1 million views or whatever. This is, people are into dumb stuff, right? So you can't hate the player, all right? It's the game. He's just playing the game. Yeah. All right. He's not a real Wing Chun person by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. Although I think he knows Juji Mufu, who's like that bodybuilder that does all that crazy stuff on Instagram. If you don't follow Juji Mufu on IG, your life is not complete. Nah. Juji Mufu's the funniest dude. Yeah. If he just does like crazy weightlifting and he does funny stuff or whatever. Right. But apparently he also is a bodybuilder who can do splits.
Okay.
And but apparently
Van Damme in it.
Yeah, he has some Taekwondo experience. And apparently, he knows Phil Hartshorn, and Phil Hartshorn was even able to convince him that Wing Chun was like okay. And so, but I think one of our students, Seth from Brooklyn, saw one of those videos, and that's the reason why he ended up joining our Brooklyn branch. So, so anyway, like all these things that draw attention to Wing Chun, even if it's kind of negative or kind of BS, it still
brings in the students.
It's still people still come in. I mean, those IP Men movies come out, and each one is kind of more nonsensical than the one before, and they still bring students. I mean, like at the end of the day, you can't hate on it too much.
All right, so next up, we got Mo Howard.
Mo Howard in the house.
Mo Howard, one of our dudes.
Yeah, one of the Three Stooges original.
Yes.
Yeah, he wasn't. Mo was the main dude, right? He didn't get swapped out like Shemp.
You're right.
Yeah, like that. Like there
was unswappable.
Yeah, the third one kept getting swapped
Curly.
out. Yeah, they kept Curly and Shemp.
Larry and Curly.
They kept dying off and having health problems. It was like that third position was bad luck in the Three Stooges, right?
No, being number 3 sucks.
Yeah. I wonder how Mo Howard's doing now. I mean, the real one.
The real one.
Yeah.
He should be okay.
Should be all right.
Yeah, he's chilling.
Yeah.
Getting that residuals.
That's what's up. Getting those checks.
Getting those.
All right, what do we got?
All right, we got, have you thought about a video with Golden Bell training host Prince? He's said good things about you, Sifu Alex Richter, and your Bruce Lee knowledge.
That's right. Golden Bell Training is a big Bruce Lee channel here. Okay. We've talked about them a couple times. He's a great supporter of the podcast on Instagram. Whenever he lives in Thailand, I think, and whenever he's listening to the KFG podcast, he'll post it on his Instagram and his stories.
Oh,
there.
Dope!
So I would love to do something.
His name is Prince.
Yes, we've exchanged a couple messages from time to time about potentially doing something together. Maybe we will do like the most epic takedown of Beardy ever, because he's also like a huge. Well, I mean, he's a real Bruce Lee dude. So if he's a real Bruce Lee dude, of course he doesn't like Birdie, because Birdie's not a real human being with any Bruce Lee knowledge. So maybe we do something in the future.
We should do that live.
Yeah, the problem is that because he's in Asia, the time is difficult.
Okay.
Right? Because there's a time difference between us in New York and Thailand. So it can get a bit tricky sometimes. Right? So we have to figure that out. So I would love to do.
What is the time difference? It's like
I think it's more than 12 hours because it's 12 hours to Hong Kong.
Okay.
And I believe when you go over to Thailand, you're moving back a little bit more. So I think it's like at least another hour, like 13, maybe 14-hour time difference.
Damn.
So, yeah.
It's always confusing.
So that means someone's got to get up early and the other one's got to stay late, or the other way around, right?
Ouch.
So, yeah, someone's got to be inconvenienced.
All right. So, yeah. He said good things about you.
Yeah. He's got a good channel. He practices Jeet Kune Do. I think he also does Zhongxin Dao, which is like a type of internal martial art. And he's very serious about training.
Zhongxin Dao.
That's right.
Never heard of it.
It's ZXD. Yeah.
ZXD.
The EWTO was into that for a little bit, and they've they are still doing it, but maybe under a different name now.
Okay.
But it's basically, from what I understood, it's some type of internal engine which can also link up with other martial arts that you practice. I mean, I'm not remotely qualified to talk about it, but it's cool stuff, and maybe we'll do something in the future. People always ask about different collabs and stuff. I'm still one of the smaller channels out there talking about Bruce Lee stuff or Wing Chun stuff. There are a couple of bigger channels, and people always ask me, why don't I get this person on or whatever, and I'm like, that person has enough press. I need to build up my channel more. And also, collabs might be interesting. Like if like Prince and I both do an episode together where we kind of take down Beardy, but interviews on the whole don't really do super great on the Kung Fu Genius podcast, unless it's John Little or Matt Pauly, right? If I don't have John Little across from me, I literally could have Jackie Chan right there and then we talk about Bruce Lee and cocaine with John Little, right? I don't care about Jackie Chan, right? It literally doesn't matter,
Stunts.
Yeah, I could have Robert Downey Jr. No one would give a crap.
Damn.
All right, but it's like, talk about Bruce Lee. We don't like it when you talk to other people. I don't know. So
weird.
People always ask me about that stuff, but it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe, but really it's just about discussion and talking about what our viewers want to listen to. And I might do more interview stuff, but I'll probably just keep it for the Patreon supporters because that shit tends to just tank on YouTube. So whatever. So yeah, sure, maybe. But there's a short list of people I would collab with, and he's definitely on that list.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. What was that James Bond movie? Golden Arm?
Golden Eye?
Golden Eye.
Man with the Golden Gun? Which one?
Yeah, he had a bunch of golden.
Yeah.
Golden
Man with the
movies.
Golden Gun had a bunch of scenes shot in Hong Kong.
What?
Yeah. It's great. Like, when you see it,
Man with
it's
the
really
Golden
cool.
Gun. I
and
remember this.
they even have a couple of Hong Kong stuntmen were in
Roger
that one
Moore?
as well.
Or
yeah, it's
Sean?
Roger Moore.
Okay.
And I read Roger Moore's autobiography last year. And he talked about shooting that because Hervé Villachez.
Shooting the gun or the movie?
No, the movie. Hervé Villachez was in it. You remember from Fantasy Island, right? And he was just talking about how just Hervé just went off the rails with the prostitutes in Hong Kong. and just was just like uncontrollable, right? And like they would go to a hotel room and there'd just be a bunch of Hong Kong prostitutes in there. He just went bonkers. Yeah, absolutely.
Hervé.
Yeah, rest in peace, Hervé Villachez.
Yeah, he played the host, right? Of Fantasy Island.
Well, no, the host was played by, I forget the name of the character, but was played by the late...
Hervé was Tattoo.
Was Tattoo, right? But the host was actually played by the late Ricardo Montalban.
Right.
Yeah.
Ricardo Montalban.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whose last acting credit was he did a voice on Family Guy. Which is great. Ricardo Montalban was just awesome. Just so
dude.
slick,
Yes.
That accent.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe he was in Naked Gun. I think he was in the first Naked Gun.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was cool, dude. Cool dude.
Man.
Yeah.
We had a friend that we would call him Tattoo.
Oh, yeah?
He looked just like...
No
he
kidding.
was bigger,
Yeah.
but he had the same face. It was
Awesome.
funny, dude.
Awesome.
All right.
What else we got?
Moving right along, we got Andrew Lin.
Andrew Lin in the house.
Yeah.
Oh, man. What's up with that guy?
Okay. Can you talk about the differences between talent and training? Are some people doomed to only peak at a certain level compared to those who have natural athleticism and talent? Or do you think training can overcome most of those differences? He always has good questions.
He does have good questions. It's a very hard question
like
to answer.
Dreisen.
No, I wouldn't say Dreisen has good questions so much as Dreisen just needs to die a violent death. But although Dreisen's questions have been getting better lately. Yeah.
I think he's
been
always had good questions.
He's been popping up a lot though, right?
I've seen these
but-
photos of
but-
people
yeah.
in that video.
There was that video. Dude, you're in the video. You're slapping him.
Yeah, but he just randomly came to the school. He's
didn't
not supposed
randomly
to
come
just
school. No.
He didn't know.
What was he giving a monologue in the school?
I don't think he even rang the bell to come up.
No,
he
no.
just popped in.
Yeah, with dirty boots all over the place. Right?
Yeah, right.
Walked
muddy.
Walked on the mats with his shoes, right? Yeah, that's Dreisen.
Dude.
So for those of our listeners who don't know what we're talking about, go to the Kung Fu Genius Instagram at the Kung Fu Genius, and probably be a few weeks back by the time this episode comes out. There's a video which happened coincidentally very shortly
super
after the Will Smith Chris Rock slapping thing.
Right.
Very coincidentally, that happened the next day.
I know. It was strange.
It was almost like we were trying to jump onto a news cycle or something like that. And and then Dyson walks into City Wing Chun and
he
starts
starts
talking
mouthing off
all sorts of ish about
Yeah.
me. Which, by the way, you initially thought was funny
No.
until you looked and you guys gave you a little side eye.
That is not. No.
And then
I
you went up
didn't-
there and you
no.
slapped him in the face.
No, I
right?
wasn't thinking it was funny.
No,
No,
all
no,
right.
no.
All
That's
right.
not what happened.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, when you
part.
finally want to learn the knives. Or
I
not.
got to
We'll
see that video.
Yeah,
To see what you're talking about.
We'll see. It's on there. It's on there. People can see it.
he was talking some serious
Yes.
snap.
So anyway,
Okay.
these questions are very hard to answer, but like does hard work and pluck and grit overcome no talent, a little talent, whatever? Are you bound to peak at a certain level if you only have this much talent or this much or whatever? And the problem is that there's really no way to answer this because these questions they're so individual. They're based on the individual that we're talking about, and it's so multifactorial. There's no like one thing. Well, if someone always has this much talent and this much work ethic, then there's a straight line and like this is what the person's going to become, because that is that really doesn't exist. Everyone is individual. Not to mention. People also have other things that come up in their lives that interfere with their ability to excel in anything, personal stuff, moving, so they no longer have access to their teacher or an injury or something. So it's very difficult to say what the factors are to create someone who's like world class. Now, I did talk about it, I think, on a recent episode that I think the best combination is someone who at least has a little bit of talent, all right? And let's say good, average, maybe better than average work ethic. Okay. All right. Because if, like I discussed before, the students that disappointed me the most were the ones that are the most talented. Because everything came easy to them and they didn't have that extra drive to try hard. And then the most talented students sometimes just get bored because they can do it, it's easy, and they don't feel challenged.
What about the other ones? The ones with no talent and no work ethic, and they just come because they love it, but that's the other thing too. This is a separate issue, but like with most martial art instructors, they have such a huge ego about like how good their students are. All right, and the problem is that of course everyone wants to have students that perform well and that represent the style that they're teaching well or whatever. But this idea that like your students have to be so good because they're learning from you means that you as the instructor are putting your own ego above what the student needs, because again, everyone's journey is different, okay? Like one person comes in just because they saw the IP Man movies and wants to, learn some kung fu for fun, but doesn't really care about being able to defend themselves, or doesn't really care about being able to fight, or doesn't really care how good they are. They just enjoy it. Because believe it or not, people are allowed to do martial arts and just enjoy it. Yeah.
Because social media gives us the idea that we constantly need to justify why we do stuff to other people. And it's like, you can just do shit because you like it. They're like, why do you always talk about Bruce Lee? Because I freaking like it. And I don't know anything else. All right? All right? I don't even know that much about Bruce Lee, but I know way less about other stuff. Okay?
Right.
All right? So, and that's fine. That's just like, if you don't like Bruce Lee stuff and Wing Chun stuff, literally don't listen to the podcast. I don't care. Yeah. All right? You're not taking anything away from me. All right? So the problem is that everyone's reason for doing martial arts are different. The one person only cares about self-defense. They only worry about if they get attacked on the street, what can they do? So they might be less concerned about their Wing Chun looking really technically clean, so much as like they just know if they need to go, that they can go in and put pressure on someone and finish the fight quickly. So that person might be driving their work ethic towards a different aim, which is just to be powerful and explosive and be competent in self-defense, and they don't really care how good their Siunam Tao looks. So the problem is, you can't even say if you have two people with the same talent and the same drive that the outcome is the same, because student A and student B might have the same level of talent, same level of drive, but student A really wants to be good at the martial art of Wing Chun, and student B only cares about self-defense. Wow. So even if on paper you could have two clones of each other, if they had a different motivation for doing Wing Chun, the result would be different. All right. So that's why these questions, I mean, these are interesting thought experiments, but they're ultimately impossible to answer.
I love thought experiments.
I love thought experiments, right? But it's impossible. It's impossible to answer because, you need to have some modicum of talent. All right. If you are completely talentless, you can overcome it, but the level of drive you need to be able to practice and overcome coordination issues or overcome whatever reason you're not able to really get it right away, your work ethic is going to have to be so much harder to overcome that. It doesn't mean it's impossible because work ethic is free. All right?
Yeah.
Okay? So if you want it, you just literally work harder and figure it out, right? But it's a little bit easier if you have at least a modicum of talent and coordination, right? Because then you don't have then your work ethic doesn't have to make up for such a deficit of lack of coordination, right? So that's why somewhere in between. Now, of course, if you are an ultra talented person, that also has a huge work ethic, then of course, then you have the potential to be world class, all right? So the problem is, you cannot put it on a graph. This much work ethic, this much talent equals this level. And also when you say, will you peak out at a certain level or whatever, I mean, well, it also depends what your aim is. I mean, like, are you trying to be a hardcore fighter? You just want to have self-defense competency. You want to be really good at the martial art of Wing Chun. You want a combination of all three. So you're peaking, where's your peak at what and what categories? And this is like, man, I feel like, remember when you slapped Dyson? Because he said,
That was Monday, yeah.
I'm not going to answer that question because I don't really know. And I literally catch myself going like, I can't answer that question, all right? And I'm sure there are plenty of people who might say, no, if someone has this much talent and this much work ethic, the result is going to be this. And I will tell you, you've only taught a limited number of people in your life. I've been teaching for 20 years. And, in various peaks and valleys of the school's been packed. I've had all sorts of different people in here. So I know I have 20 years of data of dealing with different people and going like, okay, on the average, this tends to be what kind of happens, right? If you have this much work ethic, this much talent. But even then, you'll be pleasantly and unpleasantly surprised both ways. So part of, I think, what people need to do, and I've said this before, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, is they need to stop giving a shit about other people and what they're able to do with the same amount of time that they've been practicing Wing Chun. Because the problem is you started Wing Chun, let's say, because you enjoy it, you want to do it. And then it becomes, or any martial art, you start kickboxing, you start Wing Chun, you start jiu-jitsu, whatever it is, because there's something in you like, wow, that looks cool, I want to do it. You have to think of that initial spark that brought you to it, which is joy. You're like, wow, like look at that person doing jiu-jitsu, or look at that person doing Wing Chun, or look at that person doing kickboxing. Wow, it looks amazing. I want to be able to do that. So it starts from a place of joy and wonder and exploration. And then you start doing it, and then it becomes a burden because you go, oh man, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at this. That guy can do it. That guy's better than this. That guy started the gym 6 months after me and is already able to do this and this and this. And the reason why your enjoyment then suffers is because now you're looking at everything through a lens of what other people are doing. And that has nothing to do with why you started it. Yeah. So you need to give an F, like you need to give 0 Fs about where other people are, and you need to just focus on making yourself better. And because sometimes the opposite effect can happen. You might be surrounded by people who are progressing slowly.
Okay.
And you're looking around at all the other people and they're slowing you down. And that's also not good. And you're in a room full of people who are just killers and they're accelerating way past you, and you start to get all upset in your head and have all this negative self-talk because you're not accelerating at the rate that those other people are. Well, if you're doing martial arts for a hobby, who the hell cares? Because, well, what do you need to hurry up for? I mean, like it's different if you're training for a competition or you have aspirations of becoming a professional fighter.
Okay.
Then you got to start when you're young and you have a window to start getting good at this stuff so you can start fighting with it. But if you're doing martial arts for a hobby, which I would argue most people, even people who do jiu-jitsu and MMA, most of those people, people always say like, yeah, I want to see you do your Wing Chun in MMA or whatever. Or they always say UFC as if you can just go up to UFC and fight in UFC. Hey, I want to fight in UFC. Can we do this?
Sign up.
It's like, look, you might go to a jiu-jitsu gym 2-3 times a week. You also can't fight in UFC, so shut up, all right? I don't care how much Thai boxing you've done. The level of Thai boxing and kickboxing and people who are fighting in UFC is way more than you, bro, going to your gym twice a week. The fact that you do the martial art that they do in UFC doesn't mean you can fight in UFC either, right? So most people do it for fun.
Yeah. So
who are you comparing yourself to and why? All right? It becomes this negative feedback loop of I'm upset with myself because I'm not progressing at the level of someone else. And while you spend time obsessing about not progressing, you are not progressing because you're not focusing on getting better. You're focusing on that you are not getting as good as someone else. And then because you are now not focusing on getting better, you end up not getting better because you weren't focusing on getting better. You were focusing on other people, which then feeds the dysfunction in your head about not getting better. And then you've literally trapped yourself in a loop.
Damn loops.
You see what I mean? So how about you don't give an F how good or bad other people are around you, and you just really treat martial arts as a personal journey. You might be on the same journey with other people, and training partners help each other, your instructors help you, the community helps you, but ultimately martial arts is not a team sport. It is self-exploration. So you have to unhook this idea of so-and-so was at this level or this good or knew this or learned the buji by the... Who gives a Who gives a flying all right? Literally, practice your martial art, get better, and find ways to improve. And don't give a crap about someone else. Because that just creates a negative feedback loop, which will ensure that you do not improve. All right?
Why do I feel like you're attacking me personally?
No. The reason why I'm saying this is because this is a common problem among people who decide they want to quit martial arts. It's because of a weird comparison with other people.
That loop.
And that has nothing to do with why they started it, but it became that thing. They have now inherited the burden of improving at the same rate as other people when that had not when they joined, all they cared about was learning that martial art.
That was the last thing on
their
brain.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is what you have to be able to release, that unnecessary burden, because you you in general are taking that on yourself when you don't need it. And it's probably one of the biggest trappings of the way humans are, is we're constantly looking at other people and comparing, right? Looking at social media and thinking that any of that shit is real, and none of that stuff is real. Anyway, that's what I gotta say about that. That's what I say about that topic.
Wow. Okay. Alrighty then. Next up, moving right along. Do we have time for one more? Or are we?
Absolutely. One more.
Okay. Hold on, I missed the scroll right here. Oh. Next up, we got Dre Ison.
You know what's weird?
What?
This is the first time you said next time we had Dre Ison. We don't have Mikey Deane back there going, oh, God. All right?
I took advantage
we
of
do
that.
not have our sound guy. All right? I've had to do the sound. If the sound comes out janky on this episode, you know who to blame.
No.
But if it comes out fine, then we kind of accidentally realize all Mikey Deane does is hit record.
Push a button.
That's right. And today is also the day that we're going to do another live episode.
Oh, yes.
And as of this time, Mikey Deane is still sick.
Still sick. In bed.
And he's the one who runs the whole live episode. So I don't even know if we're going to be able to do it. We will see. We will put it together.
We
All
shall
right.
see.
Let's go.
Improvise. Dre Ison is asking a question. And he's first off saying, hey, get well soon, Mikey Deane.
Wow. How does he even know? We gave the information.
I know, it's so strange.
During the recording, which is not live, which is strange.
And he says that slap it felt like a feather.
Oh, he's saying you are really weak at slapping, man. Because you slapped him and he was fine afterwards. He was smiling at you. By the way, I watched.
He was more in shock.
I watched Teddy Atlas.
Atlas.
The boxing coach. He's got a podcast.
Okay.
And he also, like everyone else, chimed in on the whole Chris Rock, Will Smith thing, right?
Right.
Which is funny also because by the time this episode comes out, that shit's gonna be
old news.
Yeah, it's old news.
Someone else got slapped again.
It's old news now.
Yeah.
All right. And by the time this episode comes out in another
Older.
2 weeks or whatever, it's like, oh God, that thing, right?
Yeah. A new person gets slapped
But
by
Teddy
then.
Atlas had such a funny take on
What
it.
was it?
Because he goes, what did we learn from this whole thing? He goes, that the guy who played Muhammad Ali can't hit that hard.
Wow.
Because he goes like, look at Will Smith's size compared to Chris Rock.
Yeah.
And,
Chris Rock should
and
have
Will
been
Smith
down.
pulled back and put the hip into it
Cocked
and everything like that, and Chris Rock took it and kept going.
Yeah.
So that means basically
He laughed it off.
Basically, Teddy Atlas was saying like, that's Hollywood for you. The guy who can train and pretend to be Muhammad Ali,
Right.
that guy can't even hit. All right. And then they were talking about
That's brutal.
what if there was a counter puncher, or what if that was Mayweather that he tried to throw at, and they were talking about how everyone would just fade out and give him the overhand right and everything.
Oh, yes. I got to see this.
Yeah, it was pretty good. All right, so what does Dyson got for me?
Dryson's asking, do you think Bruce Lee had any inclination of when Roman Polanski believed he was the killer of what happened in his house? Did Bruce Lee have any idea that Roman was asking about his glasses?
Wait a minute.
What?
Dyson, this is the third legitimate question Dyson asked. And this is the first one he's asked where he didn't have a hypothetical before it.
I'm reading it right here.
Has Dyson turned a new leaf?
I don't know, but he's curious about this.
So the question is, okay, so according to Matt Pauly's book,
Right.
all right, and that bit of information he got from Roman Polanski's biography,
Right.
that at the time of the Sharon Tate murders, where, the Manson family murders and
Yeah.
all that, Roman Polanski, who was married to Sharon Tate at the time, she was pregnant, she was murdered, with a number of other people, Jay Sebring, so on and so forth. And they didn't know at first who had done it.
Yeah,
they didn't know
for like a good week, 2 weeks.
No, I think it was a little bit longer than that,
Yeah.
actually. But they didn't know who had committed the murders, and a lot of people were scared because there was like some satanic crap attached to it or whatever. And Roman Polanski at that time was learning martial arts from Bruce Lee. In fact, they had even traveled, I think, to Switzerland together. Mm-hmm. And, Bruce at that time, kind of post Green Hornet,
I love Roman Polanski
was
movies, by the way.
teaching straight leads for cash, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so he was basically a personal trainer to the
He
stars.
was teaching Sharon Tate, too. Here and there, maybe.
No, I think he taught her just for the movie The Wrecking Crew. He did the choreography. Also
okay.
with Nancy Kwan as well.
All right.
Who would later go on to play the Ruby Chow character in Dragon the Bruce Lee story. And she actually knew the real Bruce Lee, right?
Dude.
So, you see, in that time when Roman didn't know who had killed Sharon Tate and everyone else there, he started to go through a list of people who it might be. Because whenever something like this happens, in general, it's usually someone who knows you, who like if there's a murder, usually there's someone who knew that person who killed them, right? Of course, there's random acts of violence and stuff, but when it seems personal, it's like, did you cross somebody? Is there someone out there who's got a vendetta? And for some reason, Roman suspected it could have been Bruce Lee, even though obviously he had a good relationship with Bruce Lee.
Right.
But he was thinking, like, who among all the people that he knows would have the physical capabilities to kind of like take out a bunch of different people. Now, I don't think Bruce, if he wanted to murder 5 people or however many people got murdered, I don't think he could like physically do that without people running or whatever. But like at that time, there was a perception that, Bruce Lee was like a superhuman and he could do that, right? And there were a pair of glasses left on the scene from one of the killers.
Yeah.
And Bruce Lee wore glasses. And when Roman came back, and then he starts investigating, him and Bruce Lee meet, and Bruce talks about how he lost his glasses. And Roman had the glasses because he was also kind of becoming like an armchair detective trying to figure out who had done this. And he kind of suspected that maybe Bruce Lee was the killer or one of the killers and left his glasses there. So then Bruce said he had to go to the eyeglass shop to get a new prescription. So Roman said, well, why don't I pay for your new eyeglasses? When really what he was trying to do was find out to see if those eyeglasses were the same prescription as the glasses that were left, at the murder scene. And then so he goes and he pays for the glasses and checks the two prescriptions, and they're not the same. And then realizes, okay,
what if they were the same?
Yeah, I know. Can you imagine? What if they were the same and Bruce still wasn't the killer? Like, can you imagine how that would have dramatically changed Bruce Lee's life?
Like a Dyson hypothetical, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I'm pretty sure that Bruce would have had an alibi because at that time he was training a lot of people. He was teaching. He had
it written down too.
Paxao for cash, at that time, right? He was a broke actor at that time. So. But I'm pretty sure Roman Polanski never mentioned anything to Bruce Lee about suspecting him. And I'm of the impression that Bruce Lee didn't know either. And I don't think that he had an impression that Roman thought that.
Yeah.
But I would need to actually read Roman's biography. I think if that were the case,
I read it.
I haven't. But I did read that tidbit in Matt Pauly's book. But I think that if Bruce had suspected that Roman suspected him, I'm pretty sure that would have been in Matt Pauly's book. And although it's been a couple of years since I reread Matt Pauly's book, I don't think that was mentioned in there. But, it's been a couple of years since I read it. So I might need to give it a reread.
Damn.
Yeah. And that's all I got to say about that. All right, guys, well, I hope you liked that episode of The Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to The Kung Fu Genius, hit that bell for notifications, and if you have questions for any future episode of The Kung Fu Genius, go ahead and write those in the comments below. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm sea kung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilled. Alex Richter, always the victor.
All right.
Hey,
so
I have to start the episode the normal way. All right? Okay?
Already
Already fucking
Only we
up.
had Michael
Okay.
Deane, we would have.
No, that was on you. We don't have Mikey Deane again, so please check the audio, make sure it sounds fine, see if you need to do any adjustments. We are fucking idiots. Okay, all right. Now I need to go in that position to dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, your ass.
Yo. All right, peeps. On today's episode of The Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems, lots of kicking tires, lots of, I heard Bruce Lee got dead by some, like...
Got dead?
Yeah. He deaded it. He got deaded. All right, peeps. All right, peeps. What do people do when they...
You have to say something like, surmise all eyes on the prize.
Surmise all eyes on Bruce Lee's eyeglasses. Lots of, hey, I heard Bruce Lee died from some like Japanese electromagnolatical muscle stimulation. Hey man, I heard Bruce Lee got died. Hey. All right, peeps. On today's episode of The Kung Fu Genius. Why you do that to me? All right, peoples. Stop. No. Where's Mikey Deane when you need him?
You don't have him, you have me.
Lots of, hey, Jack, I heard that Bruce Lee cat died from some Japanese electromagnetic stimulation muscle machine. Man, I must have saw this on the internet some point. Let's get...
That was too long.
The genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube.
Good enough. All right.